started in 2000 with sort of software, that kind of stuff. Then graduated to websites because that was a thing back in the sort of mid-1990s. Then started doing general marketing, been doing that for basically 10, 15 years, and now for the last 2, 3 years I've been doing more and more general business coaching, business growth kind of stuff. If you want to take your business, take it ×2, ×3. That's where I basically make most of my living these days, but you know, marketing is one of those things that's still interesting. I still like doing it. It's still fascinating because it changes every day. So you know, I try to make sure I keep a pulse on what's going on, especially these days where the pace of things is obviously a whole lot faster. So we'll be just kind of going through a couple of general things and then kind of narrow down. Let's start with the obvious. What is marketing? And marketing ultimately is, for one, it's the reason we're all here. We've all heard of this, either social media, you got an email, Heather called you might have gotten an email from the chamber. All of that is considered marketing. What you're wearing tonight, the shoes you're wearing, the restaurant you ate lunch at, all of that is very much influenced by marketing. So it's ultimately influenced by people like you, people like me that are trying to sell a product, sell a service, get you to do things that you may not want to do, or get you to do things that are good for you. Fitness, for example, nobody really wants to do it, but if that's what you're selling, then it's like, oh my God. So you're trying to get people excited, whether they want to or not, and that's really what's marketing, what it's all about. So some of the things that have changed over the years is obviously the diversity of marketing. Back in the days where some of you may remember when there was 1 or 2 TV channels, right now we have 140. You know, social media at one point was something that was, you know, the days of MySpace. If anybody still remembers that, that's now long gone. But every once in a while somebody still drags it up. Then Facebook came around. So the number of channels have greatly multiplied over the years. You have multiple ways where people get their news. Unfortunately, most of them get it off of Facebook right now. The quality has probably declined a little bit. If you're sitting there believing everything that you're reading on Facebook, you probably have an issue. So that is somewhat how life has changed over the years. So where probably 20, 30 years ago, people were bombarded by only a couple of thousand messages a day. Now it's tens of thousands. And that is one of the reasons people are so ADD these days. It's very difficult to get somebody to actually sit down and focus on the same thing for long enough to actually get a message, which is why people get their news on Facebook. It's usually 5-second sound bites, and whether they're true or not, they kind of stick with it. So that is somewhat how the marketing industry has changed over the years, and as a small business owner or as a head of a nonprofit or whatever you may be, you just have to sit there and say, okay, so how can I take advantage of that? How can I use it to sell my product and sell it wisely? And that is some of, I think, what we need to talk about tonight. Whenever you're formulating a message, you basically have 2 choices. You can either be super cutting edge and break through the clutter. That's what people remember. Or you can be sort of so-so and just hammer it home and run it over and over again. If you're Coca-Cola, that's a great way to do it because they have lots of money. So you can run the same ad 20 times a day and it doesn't really hurt you. If you can't afford 20 ads a day and you have to rely on one, then you probably want to do something that is somewhat more interesting and somewhat sticks out more in the noise that we're subjected to every day. What we'll do here today is I basically am going to touch on some of these things. If anybody has a question, by all means, please just interrupt me. I don't like doing the whole question at the end, because by the time we get to that in an hour and a half, you're going to be like, now what was it that I was going to ask? Doesn't really work. So if you're like, hey, I have a question, just get my attention, throw some, whatever, we'll make it happen from there. So, what is marketing? It's the need to satisfy a customer need profitably, which somewhat is always, that is what some people have a hang-up with when you talk about some of the big corporations. They can afford loss leaders, where you sell something at a loss and you're like, well, it brings people in and I make it up in the big picture. For most small businesses, none of you can probably afford to lose money on anything. So profitability always comes in. We need to make sure that we know how much it actually costs to acquire a new customer, how much they usually spend with us, and we need to make sure that we're aware that our advertising somewhat pays off for us in the end. And most of the time when I start coaching small businesses on marketing, I'm like, okay, so is your advertising working? And they're like, well, I'm really not sure. Which is somewhat of a problem, because if you're sitting there and you're like, okay, my marketing budget, if you have one, is X, and I ask you if it's paying for itself, and you're like, well, I'm really not sure, it's probably not a good start. If you called your banker and you're like, okay, so what investment am I getting on my savings account, then he could tell you down to the penny. To some extent, that's what you want to do in your marketing dollars. You want to be able to say, okay, so I'm spending X and I'm getting Y. Some of the new ways of marketing these days, it's a little easier to tell. Facebook, for example, will very much tell you how much response you're getting out of your ads, which ones are working, which ones are not. Most of the traditional media, they really can't tell you all that much. So some of it, you have to design your advertising to actually then turn around and speak to you. So if you have for example, we've done it before where we have a special that only runs on one marketing channel. Back in the days, and one of my local clients here is Atwood's Bakery, and since I'm dating Jennifer Atwood, she always gives me permission to use her little marketing success stories or fiascos, whichever they may be, in these classes. So back in the day of Facebook first coming out, somebody decided to order strawberries, then somebody else decided to order strawberries, and then somebody else ordered more strawberries, so all of a sudden there was 50 flats of strawberries. 5 stacks about this high, and we're like, okay, so you really can't only use them for a couple of days. So we said, okay, why don't we do a strawberry platter and put it on Facebook? So about 15 minutes after we did that, here comes Mark Atwood, rolling across the bakery, and he's like, I don't know what Facebook is, but somebody wants a strawberry platter. So, long story short, we actually sold all 50 flats into little strawberry platters, didn't lose any money, and it very much worked for them. The other proof was that Facebook clearly was something that worked for them, and we have used it quite a bit over the years. Right now, between all the companies, we probably spend 50, 60 grand a year on Facebook, where we used to spend that kind of money on, let's say, phone books and TV ads and whatever else. So, you know, social media is certainly not free. It can be. The other thing you have to remember, whatever I'm sitting here telling you, the story is different for everyone. Whatever your customer is, where they are, what they think, that's one of the things that we'll talk about in a minute. Customers differ very much. So if I'm saying, hey, Facebook works for Atwoods, it doesn't mean that Facebook works for Simpson Security. So that's something that you want to keep in mind. The principles we talk about here are very much things that they work. They may not work for everyone. You just have to figure out kind of how they're going to work for you. So if you're doing in a B2B setting where you sell into other businesses, your Facebook exposure is probably fairly limited. If you're selling to a consumer or you're selling a feel-good product, Facebook might be a whole lot more interesting. So again, that's some of the stuff that we'll talk about here in a little bit. Going back to the consumer needs is basically what we all satisfy. To some extent, you have to figure out what exactly it is you're selling. Atwoods is certainly not selling cakes. They're selling the laughter and everything at a birthday party. You guys are not really selling fitness club membership. You're selling health or good looks or whatever it may be. So as a company, you have to figure out what it is that people are buying, because what you're selling is usually not what they're buying. You're selling security systems, they're buying safety. Does that make sense? So, and that very much differs. Sometimes even the same company, it may mean something different to different people. So for example, what we see with a bakery is you have some people that buy the happy birthdays, you have some people that buy the prestige of the Atwoods box, because they want people to know that they actually spent money whenever they bought the desserts. So you have to sit there and basically figure out, okay, who is my customer and why are they buying? What are they buying? So that's something that very much a question that each one of you have to answer for your own business, and just figure out, okay, so what business am I in? And you know, that's something that some people may not have thought through, some people may very well be aware. The museum, for example, what do you guys sell?
Culture.
Okay, so that's a very good answer. So people go there for culture, where the product that changes hands might be a ticket or a membership, but it's people want to feel like they have culture. So that's something that, you know, that's very interesting. What business are you in?
Hobby store.
Okay, so you're selling.
Entertainment.
Okay, again, that's. So if you're saying you're selling entertainment, then that's something that your customers, you want to target them in an entertainment kind of way. You're not saying, hey, I'm selling trains, you're saying you're selling the enjoy of using them. Does that make sense? So again, that's something that we need to all be aware of. Your basic marketing. The four things that we always talk about is the sponsor, which is you as a company that is basically putting the message out. You have the message itself, which is usually your ad, your communication, it might be a press release. You have the channel, the media, so that might be TV, it might be Facebook, it might be something totally different. And then you have the consumer, and that's where you need to figure out how they're actually perceiving your product. So, and we'll kind of go through each one of these, because in order for you to make a change, in order for you to figure out your marketing, you can make changes to all four of those components. You can say, okay, I can change me, I can change the ad, I can change the channel, and I can expand on my consumers. So far, everybody with me? I see nodding heads, that's always a good thing. So let's start with the company itself. What can we change about the way you're doing your business? And one of the things that we look at there is your product itself, your company culture. You know, what am I selling? Am I selling a service? If I'm selling a service, how can I change that service to where it reaches more people, to where it's more appealing, to sometimes how it's easier to pick up. For example, you know, if you have a fairly expensive product, doing a payment plan might be something where you can put out extra customers, if you will. So you have to figure out if you're affordable, if the products you're selling are resonating with the marketplace. If you want to expand on the products, how can you do something where you can upsell, for example? Which upsells, obviously, that's usually the increasing your ticket item, if you will. So if you have a customer that comes in and they're spending on average $20, if you can get them to spend $22, that extra $2, you don't have to pick up any more customers, and you don't have to increase the frequency in which they buy. You just get $2 extra every time they come. So Again, upselling is something that very much is a easy way to increase your bottom line. I'm using the first example. If they come in and you're selling them either accessories or you're selling them power bars, whatever you're selling them beyond the membership makes you extra money. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So, and I'm using these guys because their marketing is great. They have the little, this is the company I work for. So, kudos for that. Well, assuming you're not working for Nike, right? If you are, I'm honored. That's all I can say. So, again, what the company stands for and what your product stands for is something that you want to, any time you want to do a marketing plan, you want to start figuring out where your marketing needs to be. That is basically where you need to start. I don't care if you're selling insurance, if you're selling caskets, whatever it may be, if you're selling services. You need to be fully aware of what your product is, how you can expand in the future. We'll talk about trends and spotting in a little bit. But that's number one, that's where you want to start. And then of course, you know, when we talk about the market, your customer, who they are, how they perceive your product, what usually works and how we do this in exercises is you want to create this customer avatar. Basically, you know, Jane is a toy collector that likes to play with trains. So if we build this virtual Jane in our head, then you can say, okay, if Jane was coming to my hobby store, then this is where she would go, and this is where she goes to eat, this is what she does at night, she watches these channels. Does that make sense? So, for example, if you look at it for, you know, we also have a restaurant, so we look at it, we're like, okay, so we're catering to foodies. Foodies watch probably Food Network on TV. There are some other channels that foodies, quote unquote, go to. So we can very much, we go through our marketing and we start looking at it with what are these people interested in? What else might they be interested in? Now, you know, if you start looking at Facebook ads, for example, you can tell Facebook, okay, give me people that, for example, like the Food Network. Now, that for us narrows it down in a huge way because then we can say, okay, people in Alexandria that have liked the Food Network on TV narrows my entire market down to a very narrow audience. And then I can say, well, you know, give me the ones that like Food Network, that like Emeril Lagasse, that like Wolfgang Puck, name a TV chef, whatever it may be. So the customer avatar really works for us, and it's something where you can give your customers names, especially if you have more than one target market. Let's say you're dealing with some people that are about retirement age, you deal with some people that are in their mid-20s to early 30s. You basically build all your avatars, your typical customers, and then you start figuring out how to actually advertise to them. So you may have 2 or 3, but that's a whole lot easier to sell to them when you're like, okay, so this week I want to run an ad that speaks to the Janes. Then you can say, okay, Jane would be interested in Food Network, she would be interested in HGTV. Jane goes here, she doesn't read the newspaper in paper form, she reads it online or she reads it on her smartphone. So all of those are things that you want to consider because it makes life a whole lot easier. And that's small business owners, they're all usually fairly busy. Nobody ever has time, so we want to make sure that we're very efficient about these things. So, and somewhere in between I should have probably changed that slide. Now we talk about channels, and channels are very much where you advertise. So again, we have traditional media, be it billboards, be it newspapers, be it TV, radio. If you remember the big phone books that we used to have many years ago, every once in a while I see a phone book running around, and don't get me wrong, phone books have their place in life. If your customers are out in the middle of Grand Parish and really have no internet connection, or your customers are between 75 and 90, then the phone book is probably somewhere where you absolutely have to be. For everyone else, the phone book is probably not so much a big deal anymore. And that's what we saw with the bakery a couple of years ago, whenever I cut all the phone book ads out. I mean, the phone book people were furious. They're like, well, you can't do that. And I'm like, well, guess what? That's what we're doing. And we started putting some of that money back in new media because, again, advertising, marketing is what actually, that is what brings people to your business. That's what brings people in the door. So you certainly don't want to say, oh, well, we're cutting that out and I'm going to go home with that money, because that's probably not going to work. So new media, we're dealing with things like Facebook, we're dealing with Twitter. If any of you might have heard of things like Snapchat or WhatsApp or whatever else, there's tons of things out there, and sometimes I throw these words around and people are like, okay, how do you keep up with that? Well, some of the problem is you as a business owner actually do have to keep up with it enough to where you figure out where your customers are. I don't expect you to play Pokemon Go, you just have to know enough about it to actually figure out how to take advantage. So, and I have the Pokemon Go app on my phone, and it's something that's I have a bunch of Pokemon. I don't really know what the hell I'm doing with them, but I have them and I know how to bring people to a business using it. Speaking of which, that's one of the trends that we've taken advantage of. Crave down the street is a coffee shop. Their sales have between doubled and tripled ever since Pokemon Go started.
They have some in our parking lot. I mean, people have come in to work out because there was Pokemon in the parking lot.
Well, there you go.
See, we've gone exactly opposite. We refuse to touch it, because we have a very serious exhibition going at the moment, and the last thing, we want is people.
Right, and it can very much interfere with what you're doing, because, I mean, the flip side of that is if you are doing something that is dead serious and all of a sudden you have 100 teenagers coming through playing Pokemon, you're like, okay. But, that's some of the things, especially downtown, that we saw 30 Pokestops, and it's like, people come in and they're on the street at 10 o'clock at night, and we're like, well, I made a phone call. Usually we close the coffee shop at 9, and I'm like, yeah, we need to stay open an extra hour because there's like people. I mean, they're demanding products, so I'm like, why not? So, again, if you can take advantage, if you can figure out how to do something for your business that incorporates the Pokemon craze, then that's certainly something you want to do because it's there, so let's use it. And, we started Pokemon cupcakes, Pokemon drinks. I'm like, come up with a Poke latte, I don't really care. As long as it sells product. So, and it very much encourages people to walk. They all of a sudden, they're out and about, they're doing things. So if that's something that fits into your business model, or, if you're like, okay, I'm selling security systems, well, your customers will be out of the house a lot more than they used to be if they're Pokemon Go people. So it's something, or if you're like, if the Pokemon people are constantly coming up to your house, then that might be a security concern. So again, it's like you just have to sit there and kind of brainstorm and see how it affects you. I saw a news report the other day where basically somebody had a Poke gym in their house because they live in the old church. And apparently there's nothing anybody can do about it. I mean, it's there and you just kind of live with it. So it's like, okay, so, again, for most businesses, if you can take advantage of it, why not? Now, one word about media. We all, like I said, I've had it out with the ad reps before. If anybody tries to sell you advertising, I can guarantee you they come into your business and they are #1 at something. That's usually what they do. They're like, oh, we're #1 in this market, and we're #1 in women, and we're #1 in one-legged men that are between the age of 50 and 54 and a half. Whatever it may be, they all have their little niche, and the trick is to basically cut through the chase and say, okay, so what exactly are you selling me? And you want to be a little bit analytical about it. To give you a very good example about local TV, if you will, this market only has one rated station. So that means that KLB can tell you how many locals actually watch their advertising. I want to say Jambalaya right now has a 10 share, so that means 10% of the market will watch Jambalaya. So about, in this market of 125,000, I want to say, so 12,500 people watch Jambalaya every morning. That being said, if you're buying 10 spots on Jambalaya, that doesn't mean that everybody in the market has seen your commercial. And that's sometimes how, you know, the TV station will make it sound. It's like, oh, so we have a 10 share, so if you're buying 100 points, is what they call it, then that means 100% of the market has seen your commercial. And no. Because that means that, for example, if our restaurant, 10% of Alexandrians eat there every night, if you eat there 10 times in a row, you didn't run into everybody in town, because there is people that will not eat down here. So same thing with KLB. Not everybody in town will ever watch KLB. So whenever people come in, they're like, oh my God, we have the best thing ever. Make sure you somewhat cut through the chase and try to analyze, and that's why you want to have a healthy mix whenever you actually buy advertising. Because there's people that will never read the newspaper. There's people that don't have cable TV. There's people that don't even watch TV. There's plenty of people that don't drive around, so they're not really exposed to billboards. So again, that is something that you want to keep in mind whenever you're spending your hard-earned money on advertising. I'm not going to stand here and say that you don't have to spend it, because I promise you, you do. Without advertising, your business is probably not going to go very far. Yes, there's the occasional fluke where you're like, oh my God, I got on Facebook and I have a great product and people are buying and it's just absolutely awesome. Usually that doesn't last very long. You still have to keep repeating to those customers. You have to promote Facebook posts. You have to run TV commercials. We actually take it so far to actually say, okay, you really do want to have a marketing budget. You know, but most people are like, well, you know, I'm a small business, I really don't know about budgets, and that's really not the way I do it. You want to make sure you're dedicating part of your income back to your business. That's one of the most important things. If you walk out of here and you're like, the only thing I remember is I need to spend money on marketing, I'm okay with that. Because ultimately, that's how you grow your business, that's how you keep reaching out, that's how you make sure that people keep coming back. Because they have to be reminded, again, this is 2016, people's attention span isn't the greatest. So they literally forget you were there for weeks, 2 weeks at a time.
Tobias, is there a percentage that businesses should put back into marketing?
It very much depends on your product. If you're a convenience store and you're edging out a 2% profit, I can't say 10% of your sales should go into marketing. If you're, for example, in my consulting business, because it's all very much, basically everything I'm making, there's no product, it's all services. So I can say, okay, a new customer to me might be worth $5, it might be worth $50. Going back to the fitness example, you guys will regret by the end of the day you sat there. So if your membership is $10, so one customer with one membership is worth $120 per year. So how much can I actually spend to acquire one customer? Well, in your case, probably not $120 because that doesn't really make you money. So in your case, you have to sit there and say, okay, out of the $120, how much am I willing to spend to get one more person in the room? And that depends on, obviously, how much you're spending to actually service the customer. So, you know, if I'm selling hamburgers and I'm saying, okay, one hamburger, I'm selling it for $5, it costs me $1 to make, it costs me $1 to actually produce it, labor, so I have $3 left. Usually $1 will go for your overhead. So I have $2 left, so I can spend $1 to sell my hamburger and I go home with the other dollar, I'm okay. As soon as any of those numbers change, you may not be okay with spending a dollar on customer acquisition. So, you know, again, that's one of those things where you just have to actually sit down with your actual business numbers and say, okay, my profit may be 10%. How much am I willing to spend on that to make more? Does that make sense? So that's something that there is an answer. There is usually, depending on the industry you're in, there may actually be concrete numbers where you can say, you know, if you call Heather at the LSBDC and you're like, okay, what's the average spend in my industry to go back into advertising? Heather can tell you that. If you call me, I'm like, yeah, give me 5 minutes, I'll call you back. And I'm like, okay, so, you know, we can look that up. You can probably go and plug it into Google and get a very good answer, depending on your business. I know financial planners, for example, cost of acquisition for a new client for them could be $100. They don't care. Because a new client for them makes them thousands. So it's like, do they really care? Probably not. I have a client in Oakdale that services machinery. Basically, every single job is worth $300,000 plus, and he sends out calendars every year that cost him 75 bucks a piece. Does he care? Not really. Because again, one calendar, one new client, $300,000 in the bank, and he's like, okay, I'm fine with that. So that's something to keep in mind. As far as the message is concerned, again, that's what I talked about earlier. You do want to make sure you stand out in the clutter. You have something that very much resonates with people. We'll talk about content here in a little bit, but the standing out is very much important. If you drive to work every day the same route, you probably won't know what exactly it looks like until somebody paints a building pink and you're like, holy crap, I never knew that was there. So that's a very good example for things standing out. If everybody else has white delivery vehicles and you paint yours pink, I guarantee you will get attention. So it's the same thing here. If everybody else does the same thing and you're the crazy guy that gets on TV with a pink suit, or, you know, the chamber hired a guy not too long ago for a membership drive. He's the only consultant that wears these crazy suits, and he's what is he, a comedian by trade or something like that?
It's Your Chamber Connection is the name of the business. It's a consultant that does nothing but chamber membership drives all over the country and in Canada too. Because as you know, there are chambers everywhere, and he wears colorful zoot suits. He's a former comedian and motivational speaker, but their methodology works, and he's a great motivator, but he wears these suits. He spends a fortune on them. They're all custom, but he might wear a, you know, purple zoot suit silk with a you know, teal color shirt, just these combinations. But what he does works. It's just part of kind of his thing, his shtick.